What is up everyone, and welcome back to another video. So in today's video, what I'll be doing is a full guide on colorblind modes, specifically the best colorblind modes to use in Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 3. In this video, I'll start off by giving a brief introduction to colorblind modes, then I'll explain why they're used in the first place, and then I'll be doing a full comparison of all colorblind modes and giving you guys my opinion on which one you should be using in Fortnite. Before we get into it though, if you find this video helpful, then be sure to drop a like on it, and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content just like this in the future. As well as that, consider using code Teckoh in the Fortnite item shop as it's 100% free and it really helps your boy out a lot. But with that said and without further ado, let's get into today's video. So starting off this video, I want to begin by discussing what colorblind modes actually do and why people decide to use them. So as you probably know, colorblind modes were initially created for people who have actual colorblindness to see the game properly. But in Fortnite, these modes became very popular very early on because throughout Chapter 1, they actually gave a competitive advantage as they allowed you to basically see into the storm better. And obviously that's extremely useful in mid-game and endgame. And although that was patched and that was the main reason people used colorblind modes at the time, people have still continued to use colorblind modes over time and they remain pretty popular today. A lot of popular players use colorblind modes in Fortnite such as Reverse2K who uses Tritanope 10, Clicks who uses Deuteranope 2, and Andretta who uses Protanope 5. So the big question that comes up with that in mind is why should you actually use colorblind modes if they no longer give you a direct competitive advantage? And the answer to that question is extremely simple: preference. The thing is, pretty much every single person has a completely different preference as to how they like things to look. Some of us prefer a darker game, some prefer a brighter game, and some prefer different colors to pop out more, and overall there's just a ton of variation in what you might prefer to see in your game. So with that in mind, colorblind modes are still an incredible tool that you can use to adjust the look of your game in very subtle ways that don't cause your entire game to look wonky, and that's why you'll still find a lot of pros using them to this day. Another thing to keep in mind is that they can technically give a small competitive advantage if you do find a mode that makes it easier for you to see things in game. Obviously, if you're not actually colorblind, it's not going to make a world of difference, but certain colors popping out can definitely make things easier for you depending on your own vision. So overall, colorblind modes are definitely a great tool to tinker with and see what works best for you. Getting into the next section of today's video, I'm now going to go ahead and display to you guys each of the different colorblind modes in Fortnite. Specifically, I'll be showing you guys each mode individually on levels both 5 and 10, and then I'll show you them side by side so you can get a better idea of how they compare. Keep in mind that the day-night cycle is constantly running in Fortnite, so that might distort things a tiny little bit, so they might differ a tiny bit, but this should still give you a really good idea as to how each mode generally looks. Starting off, we've got this mode, which is just the regular game with no special settings applied. So basically, this is just the regular game. And onto our first mode, we've got Deuteranope 10, and here's what that looks like. Then we'll switch over to Protanope 10, and here's what that looks like. And lastly, we've got Tritanope 10, and here's that. As well as that, I'll show you guys each mode on level 5 as well, so it's not quite as extreme. So these are basically like the toned down versions. So right here is Deuteranope 5, which is a much more mild version of the original style. Then here's Protanope 5, the same case applies here. And lastly, we've got Tritanope 5, which is, as you would expect, a milder version of Tritanope 10, who would have thought? So that should give you a general perspective of how each mode looks. The way you see it is going to differ a little bit from person to person, but I personally find that Deuteranope is a bit darker with less contrast. Protanope is kind of mid-level darkness with a bit more contrast than Deuteranope. And then Tritanope is a much more bright and vibrant mode with a lot of contrast between most objects, especially when it's daylight. With that said though, just so you can get a better idea of what they look like compared to one another, we'll go ahead and pop up a side-by-side of each mode on screen right now. As you can see, we've got the regular mode with no colorblind settings, and then we've got Deuteranope 10, Protanope 10, and Tritanope 10. So hopefully that comparison gives you an even better idea of how each mode looks. So moving on from that, the next topic of discussion in this video is going to be my recommendation, basically the mode that I recommend you try and how I recommend you approach setting it up. Now keep in mind, this is all going to come down to preference. My preference could be totally different from yours, which could be totally different from your favorite pros. Most of this stuff is super individual and really just depends on you. But with that said, if I had to pick a specific mode to use in my own gameplay, I would probably go more towards the Tritanope route. Personally, I just really like the vibrance of the Tritanope mode, and I feel like it makes things easier for me to differentiate and is really just a more visually appealing version of the game. But with that said, I probably would not use Tritanope 10 just because it's a bit much. It just seems kind of heavy and intense, and I think I'd opt for a more mild version, probably anywhere between levels 3 and 6. That would be enough to have a noticeable visual difference, but not have it be overwhelming. So what I recommend you guys do in order to find your best colorblind mode is simply going to be hopping into the game. I recommend you try to jump into the game and play it like normal, except experiment with each different mode on each different level. By doing this over and over again for a little bit of time, you'll be able to figure out which modes look more visually appealing to you, and from there you're going to be able to narrow it down to which one you like the best. It might take a little bit, but trial and error is pretty much the only way to guarantee that you find the mode that suits you, as trying them in creative or seeing them in a YouTube video will really only give you so much when it comes to knowing which ones you might like. Don't get me wrong, it's very helpful, but it can't really give you the full level of precision that your own game can. Plus, it doesn't account for other things like your actual setup. So what I recommend you do is first try to find which actual mode you prefer, aka Deuternope, Protnope, or Tritonope. Then you'll want to set that one to 10 and slowly work your way down until you find the sweet spot. Basically, the sweet spot should be between your game looking mostly normal, but also giving you the optimal amount of your colorblind mode where it looks more visually appealing. Just keep in mind that there is no special mode that works for everybody, so your best strategy is simply to try them over and over until you find what you enjoy best. For some of you, you might prefer something intense like level 10, some of you might prefer it on a super low level, and some of you might even prefer no colorblind mode at all. Ultimately, it really depends on the person, but hopefully that gave you a good idea as to what each mode does and how you can get started. But with all that said, guys, that's going to wrap it up for today's video on the best colorblind modes in Fortnite Chapter 3 Season 3. I know this video was a bit shorter than usual, but I think I covered just about everything you're going to need to know when it comes to each colorblind mode and how to find the perfect one for you. If you found this video helpful, then be sure to drop a like on it, and consider subscribing as well if you want to see more content just like this in the future. As well as that, consider using code Teckoh in the item shop if you want to help your boy out a bit extra. It's 100% free for you and it seriously helps me out a ton. With that said though, thank you all for watching this video and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.